Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we'll be addressing an important topic, advancing a safe and respectful workplace for all. My name is Keir Jutla, President and CEO here at the Association for Mineral Exploration. I'm currently at the Beaver Creek Conference in Colorado right now, which is located on the traditional territories of the Arapaho and Cheyenne Nations. This area is also the site of trade, travel, gathering, and healing for many other nations, including the Lakota, Kiowa, Comanche, Apache, and Shoshone. AME's head office is in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. As this is a virtual meeting, I invite you to take a moment to quietly acknowledge the traditional territories on which you are located. Two companies have supported AME in delivering this webinar, Newmont and Teck Resources. Please enjoy this short video from our webinar and workshop series sponsor, Newmont. Thank you.
Thanks again to Newmont. My name is Brenna Nobleman, and I am the Director of Events and Membership here at the Association for Mineral Exploration, and I'll be your host today. Go over a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we introduce our speakers. This webinar is a safe space. I'd like to acknowledge the diversity in the audience today, realizing that there are people of different backgrounds and learning styles. Please take the time to word your questions and comments thoughtfully. As a participant in the Zoom webinar, your camera and microphone are off, and we cannot see or hear you. If you need technical support, please email member@amebc.ca, and Jasmine will be happy to help. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions at any time. We will save the questions for the panel after the presentations and get to as many as we can. This webinar will be recorded and will be available to registered attendees after the webinar. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. We will hear from María Paz Alarcón Fiorentino. María is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Specialist at Teck Resources Limited for Chile. In her role, María Paz leads, plans, and executes initiatives for the DE&I strategy in Chile, in line with the global EDI strategy. María Paz holds a Business and Administration BA, a master's degree in Economic Analysis from UChile, and a master's degree in Development, Gender, and Education from University College of London. She has led diversity management, gender equality, education, and sustainability projects in the United Kingdom and Chile. We will also be hearing from Tori D'Avella. As lead of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Teck Resources, Tori works across the business to foster a workplace where everyone experiences dignity and respect. Prior to joining Teck, Tori consulted with a range of organizations on Indigenous engagement, leadership development, strategic planning, and listening and evaluation in service of cultivating equitable and inclusive culture. Tori holds a Master's of Science in Organization Development from Pepperdine University's Graziato School of Business and Management and an Economics undergraduate degree from Queen's University. Over to you, María and Tori.
Hello. You'll have to give me a moment while I remind myself how to share my screen here. Okay. Does this work? Great. So thank you so much for joining. And AME, thank you so much for having us. We're super honored. I'll kick off and then pretty quickly hand over to María Paz, and we'll be going back and forth over the course of our agenda. So we're going to talk about safe and respectful workplaces for all. And what I'll say right off the bat is the journey is not complete. And so we will be sharing some of our learning and encourage you to share yours. through your questions and that sort of thing. What we will do today, one thing I should mention is that we do have some poll questions throughout. So please participate, as that'll make this much more interesting for all of us. And we value your input and your perspective. We'll talk a little bit about the journey that's got us to where we are today, the governance and the policy that drives our respectful workplace or underpins our respectful workplace, our approach to change and engagement, and then some nitty-gritty practices like safe camps and inclusion centers that help us. And then hopefully we leave loads of time for questions. So over to Maria Paz, I think. Oh, I gotta switch the slide. There we go.
Thank you, Tori. I'm waiting for my camera to be activated, so I would just wait. Thank you. So I can introduce myself. Thank you so much. So yeah, today we want to talk about fostering a respectful workplace, how to make easier to address difficult things. And as we were introduced, well, my name is María Paz. I think I do have pretty good English, but it's not my native language. So please understand if I don't make myself clear. I'm sure Tori will jump right away and clarify. As she said, we will be passing the presentation to each other. So the next slide, Tori, it's fine, thank you. Go on.
Okay, so we like to start with, is this the right slide? Yeah, okay. You can tell we use Teams usually. Speaking of this value of being humble and driven, so we like to start with our values, and one that I think is really core to this process of fostering a respectful workplace is humble and driven. And at Teck, that means we listen and we learn, and we do that in service of doing better. And I think as a whole industry, as a whole mining industry, natural resources, even broader, we have been listening and learning to marginalized voices, underrepresented voices. And so that has helped inform this kind of industry movement around improving respect at work. Certainly some things to mention. One is the Rio Respect at Work report. Certainly, and other public disclosures have helped raise our awareness of the challenges that we face as an industry, and some of our shortcomings. And that's obviously hard to talk about, but we can't change it if we don't talk about it. Second is, there is a real trust deficit with local communities, and it's been said to be mining's greatest risk. And so we need to act on that. And then we've seen this sort of shift in some of the expectations of ICMM and the Mining Association of Canada. And so this is kind of the backdrop that we're talking about more than physical safety now, and it's core to our business. It's not separate from that. So given that we're all part of this industry, we wanted to kick off, I think, with a poll question to speak to kind of what do you see as a respectful workplace? Because one of the greatest challenges is that means different things to different people, and it's not always visible. So yeah, if Irene will help us with, I think, a Menti, and you have it, okay, I see you have it in the chat, so please click the link and tell us in a word or two, what's a respectful workplace for you? These are great. So where I'm heard, safe for everyone, yes. Equal opportunities, certainly we're trying. A diverse board, transparency. I see respected, I see tolerant, acknowledged, ethical and moral, mutual respect. What have I missed? Supported, respected. These are really great. Thank you for sharing, and I think that this will be open, so feel free to add. I will go back to the slides. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for participating. Something I hear about, and I saw safety for all in your responses there. We often hear that this journey of safe or respectful workplaces is a lot like safety. And I think that's true. It is a lot like safety. And there's a lot we can leverage from the industry's safety journey. Obviously, safety, like respect, is a complex systemic issue. It doesn't take one company to solve it. It takes our whole industry, and it's critical to our success. But I think there's some complexities of creating a respectful workplace, that I think some of you point to in those responses around what you say is a respectful workplace. We're talking about something that isn't physical anymore. We're talking about our feelings. We're asking you to talk about your feelings. And this requires a lot of vulnerability and discomfort. And so while there are aspects like speaking up that, we've fostered that through our safety journey, and now we're going to continue to foster it through our respectful workplace journey, this is a challenge. And I think it's important to pick up on some of those differences as we move through this. I think I've said this, but yeah, a lot of what we're working on, it's invisible. It's attitudes, it's mindsets, it's how we think about each other. And that is a big challenge. And so, again, back to that spirit of being humble and driven, we want to recognize that we face those challenges so that we can face them in the most courageous way possible. Maria Paz? Yes.
So I think to inspire and let you know a bit more how our journey has been, can I ask you for the next one, please, Tori? Yeah, this is a very high level milestones through our journey. This is some things that we wanted to highlight to this group for Teck. So I think it's important to say that back to 2021, we can start highlighting things specifically about respectful workplace, because our EDI journey and some things that you mentioned on the mentee go way beyond that. But we wanted to highlight some work that has been done. For example, we started ICONs, which are a methodology for investigating conducts that are not respectful, that a specialized group of leaders within the organization start to talk to each other and investigate how to improve the respectful workplace challenges. And also the gender-based violence and harassment task force was formed. So then they started asking, what policies do we have? What are we missing? What are the perceptions? Like you said, what are the feelings, right? What are the employees saying about this? After that, we started with trainings. We didn't have, as you might see later, a policy. We did have a harassment policy, but we started doing our trainings and conversations around respectful workplace. And this specifically was, of course, about bias and so on, but it was about harassment, gender-based violence, prevention, where to report, and what you can do. And of course, talking about the culture of respect, like what culture do we want to build? And again, remember what Tori said at the beginning, all the Rio Tinto reports, all the context that was happening around, not only in the mining industry, but a lot of violence, right? And how we wanted to improve safety and a more healthy workplace. So also we highlight the feedback from everyone, of course, but from women in mining and Indigenous employee gathering. Remember that the underrepresented groups in the working industry, in the mining industry, for example, are those, and they are in more vulnerable position for discrimination, harassment. So we started also trying to get their perceptions and how to make a work with that focus, with a diverse gender approach and an inclusive focus. And then we will talk about this a bit later, but in Chile specifically, we started pioneer practice, which is called, it was called back then in the Project QB2, a gender office. Now it's the Gender and Inclusion Center, which was inspired in the experiences from universities that started having gender offices because of harassment and violence and prevention, and some issues that the students were highlighting. So because we had a project with such a complex ecosystem of working cultures with thousands of contractors and tech employees, we started that initiative. I will tell you a bit more about that. And other centers that have developed in tech. We did more training for leaders, which is something key that we will talk about here. And I think something key that happened in 2023, which is not that far from today, is the Inclusive and Respectful Workplace Committee. Yeah, and we will speak more detail about who is this group, the governance behind that. I think this committee was key to develop and for supervising what is now, and you can see up there, the Respectful Workplace Policy and Standard, which I think it's a key milestone that we wanted to share with you from Teck. We also in Chile have a strong legal framework around sexual and workplace harassment and gender-based violence, but this year started Ley Karin, which was very, it caused a lot of impact. Karin was an employee from the health sector that died by suicide because of workplace harassment. So now in Chile, at least, and I would dare say Latin America, there's a lot more expectations legally and requirements around companies doing prevention, having their reporting hotlines, right? Having protocols and having prepared teams with a trauma-informed approach and with a gender approach and human rights approach. So it's all in line, I must say, what happened in Chile with also what was happening at Teck globally. And I think that's what we're going. And then we also have the gender-based violence and harassment procedure, which is more specific. I will tell you more a bit that later. And I think something key that we have started to work on at Teck, and it might be an inspiration for the work that you are doing, is that we're starting to see it as a business risk, right? Not only reacting to context or things that happen or activities, consider it like the health and safety risk. We have a risk at violence or psychological safety, and then how does it all then go into all of our systems and areas of work? So the next one, please, Tori. So a bit more detailed, you can read there, but I will explain it a little bit. Like I said, the Inclusive and Respectful Workplace Committee was formed in 2023, and it had a new governance. So we had an executive DEI committee, and it is still overseeing the DEI policy and strategy, but specifically started talking about the respectful workplace. And it's chaired by our CEO, Jonathan Price, and participates key executive leaders such as Dean Winslow, Charlene Ripley, Jackie Scales, Amparo Cornejo. And they have accountability to the board. So this is a board issue, right? And then they oversee the policy and the strategy. And then what I think it's very valuable and new, and maybe your company also has it, but I think it's quite new at Teck in the last 2 years, is that now we have a respectful workplace policy, and separately we have a standard. And the respectful workplace policy, as you know, what is a policy in the organization is a commitment to provide resources, but to also to send the expectations of the behavior we expect from not only our employees, but our contractors, our visits, our students that are doing their co-op or practice, right? So I think it was like a key milestone to keep doing that, the work that we're doing. And it replaces the oldest global harassment policies that we used to have. And what I think is very valuable about the standard is now applies to whole Teck. Teck, we have operations in North America, South America, projects, and it is like the norm for all tech. And it defines specifically what is violence, what is harassment, what is not, what is gender-based violence. Of course, it does respect the jurisprudence and the legal frameworks of each country, but these are global definitions. And I think this is already a good practice that you can try to make happen in your organizations, because there are global definitions for these concepts by the United Nations, by human rights definitions or literature. So we can all speak the same language about what it is and what is not. And what to do, right? And then we also have a new gender-based violence and harassment procedure, because we realize that gender-based violence is a key issue to tackle in the mining industry. Of course, we work with all underrepresented groups about discrimination and harassment, but we did see the necessity to have a gender-based violence and harassment. So we know what to do, where to report. Also, it means that we have trained our HR teams or investigator teams, compliance in trauma-informed manner and in a gender approach manner as well, which is different than to receive, for example, someone with a health safety or an accident, right? It's different when they suffer from a gender-based violence case. I think I'm explained that correctly, so we can go to the next one. And Tori, please, you can interrupt as much as you want. Oh, please, to you, Tori, so you can speak more about this committee.
Yes. Okay. So I think you've given an amazing overview, so I won't dwell here too long. But yeah, this is kind of the level that we are working at. Our board is always very keen to hear about our, how are we progressing on fostering an inclusive and respectful workplace. And this committee, they meet quarterly, but if we ask for something by email, they are very active. And I appreciate that. And I thought maybe, we've had an executive, EDI committee for many years. But certainly with like the launch of this committee, a couple things that they did to really show their leadership. And I think that this is important it's not just about a piece of paper. It's about how do we make it alive in the organization. And so they wanted to share videos that, I think were barely scripted. I didn't work on a whole lot of speaking notes for them for sure. They wanted to release these videos talking about like, what do they see as a respectful workplace, similar to the poll you did this morning. What do they see as a respectful workplace? What are their hopes for an inclusive workplace at Teck? So, they've done a lot of that. They're very open to kind of, sharing their experiences and what this means to them. And then I thought I'd share like one other anecdote of like how active and engaged this committee is. They were approving our Pride email, and that's great. Like big employee communication. And somebody reviewed it and they said, I think this is great, but I think it's missing our pronouns. And I was like, okay, yes, they are great. They're like so on it. So, I mean, it's just a small anecdote, but I think it kind of captures the spirit of the committee. It's not just a committee who, they love to hear about updates and all that sort of stuff, but they're willing to be active. And I think that's really important for change leadership, which we're going to talk about it in a bit here as well. So anything else I missed, Maria Paz?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Great story.
Let's dive into the policy here.
Yeah. Like I was telling you, and it's great what you said, Tori, because we have, I think, a very exhaustive and robust policy. But it's like one of the new first steps because we have to live it as an organization. So just so here the group knows, this doesn't replace our diversity and inclusion policy. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion work includes way more than working on the prevention of gender-based violence and harassment. And you mentioned it even in the beginning, like working on equal opportunities, attraction, development, and retention of diverse groups, engagement, right? So that's a bit more about our inclusion, diversity, and inclusion policy. And the respectful workplace policy is very specific about our commitment to workplaces that are safe, that are inclusive, that are free of discrimination and violence. And actually, you can find this new policy in the website. It's available for our external stakeholders. Here we have a little example of the standard, which is in Spanish, estándar. So we, of course, have it available for Chile or any other operation that will need it in Spanish. And like I said, there are two separate documents, and this standard or estándar de lugar de trabajo respetuoso includes the specifics, what it is, what is not, what can we do, how can you act, and what to report. And I must say, I think that's a very valuable thing that you can develop. And yeah, just so to complement this idea, this workplace policy, respectful workplace policy and standard does not replace the equity, diversity, and inclusion, but it comes all together with our code of ethics, our purpose and values, right? And we also have another protocols and guidelines and manuals surrounding EDI. We are highlighting the main ones. But yeah, the policies, code, and standard hold us accountable for our values. Our values include to be respectful and inclusive. We believe that everyone matters and we're better together. Responsible and courageous means doing the right thing, even if it requires bold action. We actually, in our training, say that our values is about respect and inclusion, but we also call it responsible and courageous, or liderazgo valiente, which is raising your hand and saying, that's not right, I see a risk here, and also saying the hard thing, like you shouldn't be saying that, questioning stereotypes or questioning what could be a violent behavior if you're safe to do it. So we speak a lot about that with a more of a bystander view, right? And also humble and driven. We are open, we listen, and we know that we still need to improve a lot. Back to you, Tori.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit more into like, how did we implement this? And how do we, make it alive in the organization? And so our team works very closely with our change management team, our change and engagement team. I'm actually an alumni of the change and engagement team, so I'm a total nerd about change. And we really try and follow this process of fostering awareness and understanding, doing like a structured approach to getting commitment and participation. And then ultimately the goal is adoption and ownership. But I threw a little arrow around this whole thing because, as Maria Paz just said, it's a process and it's a learning process. Sorry, I just need a quick drink of water. Thank you. Okay. And so we kicked off with fostering awareness and understanding. And a lot of this started with like very detailed analysis of like, okay, what are the behaviors we want to see? What is the change that we want to create? And what is the impact on the operations and on each department, each type of like each level of the organization, et cetera. So lots of detailed analysis to get to the awareness and understanding phase, at which point, we did some stakeholder interviews from across the business to understand perceptions of the existing, like what is the workplace they experience every day? And then kind of launched into more like, okay, the standard and policy are coming. Here are some of the changes we'd like to see along with that. So briefing key stakeholders. I think everybody in a mine knows how influential the general manager is. So we really drove a lot of communications through our general managers. After that kind of introduction of the Respectful Workplace Committee, they really paved the way. And then it was sort of like we were able to cascade from there. We had interactive crew talks and training, like safety shares, that sort of thing. I think that's always really an effective approach on site. I'm actually I'm here and I'm still doing some of those related to bystander intervention right now. And then we moved into sort of like, okay, how do we foster commitment and participation? So we've spoken about some of the governance. We'll go into that. But we also needed to equip people with skills. So we want to make sure that anybody who is receiving a disclosure that could be trauma related, whether or not it's like gender-based violence and harassment, yes. But, you know, trauma can happen from a whole host of experiences. And so we've invested in trauma-informed training for folks in HR, health and safety, security, et cetera, so that, you know, not even through the investigation, but just to, you know, Maria has started with like making it easier to talk about hard things. We want to receive like, you know, hard news in the most trauma-informed way, which means recognizing that trauma might be at play, offering people choice in the way that they speak up, those sorts of things. We could probably have a whole other training on that. And then, yeah, improving our practices around tracking, reporting, investigations, you know, doing that hard work that isn't super like, it's just sort of like the groundwork to make sure that we have those pieces in place so that we're responding in the best way possible and that we're in a place to measure the impact of the whole program. So moving to kind of more adoption and ownership, a few pieces that we're going to talk about are like having standards and inclusion centers and more stuff alive at our sites to make sure people are aware that they deserve a respectful workplace and these are the ways they can create it. And then we've had more and more requests for bystander intervention training. We've integrated, you know, respectful workplace into leadership development programs and that sort of thing. And then measurement, which is hard. Measurement of a culture change is always hard. And so I think this year, a lot of our measurement has quite frankly been about the outputs. So how many people have been in training and all that sort of stuff. But we're looking forward to over the years to be able to measure outcomes through things like surveying. We have like a regular survey that will start to kind of, you know, see is there any difference from before and after in people's experience of respect and inclusion, ability to speak up, et cetera. Obviously, we're going to be looking at, you know, what kinds of incidents are reported, how, like frequency, where they're reported, et cetera. How has that shifted over time? Human rights risk assessments give us a really great view into the impact that we're having. And then, yeah, we're going to talk about inclusion centers. So I'll probably pause here and then we can talk more about measurement if you like. So let's dive in a little bit to the gender-based violence and harassment approach.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tori. And just to complement what you were saying, I think it's so interesting because one of the measurements that people might associate with this, for example, all the claims and the reports. And just as you were sharing some anecdotes, I think when you talk about this topic and talk about what is respect and do the trainings, it's very likely, and it's not a bad thing, that the claims and report will go up in your organization. So internally, we work with them, like with the leadership pertinent. But just so you know, like to measure it, it could be good that these claims and reporting goes up because people are more willing to speak up. Some of them will be more like conflict or labor relation kind of things, and others might be really deviations from the behaviors that we're expecting. So yeah. So I really like this bow tie, and I must credit her for this and the team that I have used it a lot to explain it here locally in Chile. An incident can be like gender-based violence incident. It can go from sexual or workplace harassment to sexual aggression. And I think there's a lot to do that we can do around prevention on this, not only, again, in any workplace, right? But in mining industry, as we have seen, it has become a challenge. So it's very important to have the policies, the standards, for example, that the ones that we show you, the expectations, then the education and awareness, right? I think this has a lot of more impact that you have. And again, I like, Tori, what you said, sharing anecdotes, because, for example, when we do awareness in site, even short awareness, 15 minutes, safety shares. Before it used to be only put your helmet on. Now we're doing a lot more about EDI and respectful workplace. And actually, because our employees come with other culture or they grew up this way, they don't know sometimes that something can be harassment. They are, for example, maybe used to yelling, or maybe some men are used to inviting women to go out in like more than one time, even when they say no, or maybe they do these jokes, racist jokes. So because they maybe grew up like that, and they say, oh, this is like it had always has been, this is the mining industry. But actually, when you let them know, not only like these are the rules, but you know what, this is violent, this is harassment, and it has this impact, actually a lot of them learn and change. And maybe those who don't want to change know that this is what we are expecting for them as tech employees. So awareness, and I'm saying a bit what's on the ending, but like having conversations about this is very valuable. And a lot of people sometimes go into a vulnerable place and say to their own colleagues, you know what, I don't like the way you call me. I don't like that nickname. And in 10 years, I didn't want to tell you because you are at a workplace. You don't feel that confident. So very important to have the conversation for the prevention. And then, even though it's another aspect, even though we need to work on the culture and the behaviors, it is important if we have camps, because they are like cities, to have a safe and secure physical environment, right? So we'll talk about that a little later, but we need to work with that areas as well, because it does impact on the risk. And then we are doing all that to prevent an incident. But then if that happens, because when you do a business, you have risks, right? And you have also gender-based violence risks that might happen. How do you respond appropriately to a possible victim? How do you report it accordingly, right? How do you avoid re-victimization? How do you act in a trauma-informed manner? And then how do you investigate? How you learn about it? So of course, we all are trying to do as much as possible to not have incidents, such as we don't want accidents or fatalities. But then they might happen. How are we preparing for that? How do we respond for that? So it's the same or similar view to gender-based violence and harassment. Yeah, and we're still working on that, being humble. So, for example, like I said, the physical side, of course, and I really want to get this clear, we need to do a cultural change, conversations, behavior, but we need to also work with other areas. For example, and this is some lessons that we had working in camps here in QB, and I'm sure in other camps as well in the mining industry. Go beyond what HR is leading or EDI. Include harassment and psychological safety as a business risk, and then it will go to different areas. For example, our contracts area, they design a cultural plan, right? Because not necessarily the contractors or employees that work under contracts will have the same culture as tech, same views, alignments. So we have done a lot of work around standard and respectful workplace policy awareness, education, commitments, and also requirements, like asking them to complete education, to do some work internally as well. So we can make sure that everyone is being respected in this ecosystem, like I said, in the camp. So, of course, facilities. We always talk about gender approach, which is key for respectful workplace accessibility as well, but also security in the rooms, because it might create fear. Maybe nothing is happening, but you need a proper key system, like a card, right? What are the emergency numbers? Not only because of gender-based violence, but is there like a health and safety risk? You are at your room in the camp. Is that clear? Is that protocol clear, right? And in case it is a case of gender-based violence, like, is the health and safety team ready to receive that? Are they prepared? Do they have the protocol? We have here, until I don't know if the same figure around the world, but we have a polyclinic, which is like 24/7 operating in our camp in case anything happens health-wise. And that's where a possible victim could go. So how are they prepared for that? Having a private space, having the proper conversation, calling the appropriate teams for support. And then also there are the security teams that should have emergencies considering this risk, panic buttons working, and also surveillance. So this is more on the other side of the bow tie. So it's what we don't want to happen, but if it happens, we need the registry, we need sometimes to collect evidence to understand what happened. So this sounds like really heavy, but it actually is the reality. It's better to be better prepared and equipped so you can treat the situation appropriately. Now we have another poll, and we would like to know, have you seen this in your sites, companies? Have you seen, maybe it's not communicated, but have you seen that in the facilities? Do you know for sure what is the emergency number? Or do you see any messages maybe on your campsites or the operations around respectful workplace? So we have here all of them. We have the physical, procedural, and cultural elements described. We only have the physical elements. We have the procedural elements, psychological, cultural, a little bit of everything, very present on our site. So I think it's great because we have more votes on all of them, but a bit more like a mix on the others. And I think it's something we're still working on, and we're sharing with other sites and camps as well. We'll wait maybe a bit more answers. I don't know, Tori, if you have anything, opinions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm delighted to see so many people feel like they have all of them. I think one of the challenges with our sites is, mine sites, they have long lives, and so we need to keep it up to date. Things break, and so I think that's one of our learnings is like it can't just be like, oh, we did that and it's good. It's a process of making sure locks are working and all that sort of stuff, and that we're actioning when somebody says, hey, something's broken, we're able to go and fix it pretty quickly. So yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Or as the teams rotate, like, are they getting the training, like, just in any case? So yeah, I can see those, some good ideas. So thank you. So yeah, just another initiative that we can share is the Gender and Inclusion Center. Like I said, it used to be called at the QBTU project as Gender Office. And it is there to encourage a respectful workplace environment and prevent sexual harassment, gender discrimination, or violence. So this is the focus right now because this is an issue. I think it happens a lot in Chile. We do have in Chile, of course, challenges around, for example, racism, but it's not something that has been of an issue, for example, in QB. It's more about our issues around machismo and gender-based violence. So with the project and with the operation starting in QB, we decided to maintain it and keep it like as an initiative for the operation. And it is gender specialists that work in shifts, 7 days per 7 days. So they go up 7 days and then another. So there's always a gender specialist on site, both at our operations in Cordillera, which is at high altitude, and another team at port. And they are physically there and they're doing constant awareness, the safety shares, like I told you, the workshops. They do also the implementation of our respectful workplace policy and the legal framework in Chile. But they're also there if any employee, being contractor or tech employee, have a question around these topics. Like, maybe I'm not sure that this is harassment, or maybe they look up for psychological supports because they are psychologists, and they wanna be heard, right? So they, of course, escalate situations according to to the magnitude. Sometimes it's more about listening and telling them where they can report. They don't investigate or receive reports, but they do tell them, okay, if this is your company, then you can make a report here. Like, because a lot of times these employees, even though we make a lot of efforts communicating them, they don't know the hotline, they don't know the number, or they don't know the HR rep. Even though we have full systems, they don't usually go to their computer or cell phone. So we do a lot of brochures and a lot of safety shares, so they approach them a lot. And of course, if any crisis happen, they can be there to support any possible victims. To the next one, please, Tori, and you can say Centro Género Inclusión. So like I said, awareness and training, guidance and counseling, but they also do field visits, just as we said before. So they put a gender eye, which is different, or like a diverse inclusive eye. So they might say, for example, you know what, this place is really dark at night, we need to put more light in here, or we went to the bathrooms and they're really, really not well maintained, or actually we are missing maybe some of them. So they give a different approach that is maybe not so well defined on our legal framework or literature, but they have done like improvements for that. So they work with the security team, like I said, the health and safety. And it's a safe space, like I said. And because in this case, we have external, it's an external consultancy specialized in gender. This team, it's also external. So sometimes the employees feel a bit more trust speaking to them before speaking directly to the company. And just quickly, the next one, please, Tori, before talking about the other practice, to say a bit of impact. So just this year, because in the project we cover like 10,000 employees and contractors, but around 4,000 employees, tech employees and contractors have been in awareness talk, in training. We are doing a lot of our operators, right? Operator maintenance. They actually received the topic quite well. They want to talk about this. They want to learn more. And they want to keep them going. We also do discrimination, gender-based violence, day against homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia, how to be an ally, or even mental health. Back to you, Tori.
Awesome overview. And on the note of mental health, we will we'll talk a bit about the fun transition on that slide. Okay, the Teck Wellness and Inclusion Center at our Red Dog operations, which is a fly-in, fly-out operation in northern Alaska. Maybe before I get into this, I'll say I don't see any questions in, but we're about to move to questions. So if you have one, please put them in the Q&A panel. And we'll look forward to those. So yeah, we wanted to do something similar, try it out on another site as the Gender and Inclusion Center. And then we brought it up, and I would say the team at Red Dog was like, well, yeah, sure. But like, let's make it about wellness. Like people need wellness. They need like mental health support, et cetera. And there's this great convergence because we were bringing on counselors at that time. And so we have 2 counselors full-time at this operation, and they support obviously people who need to chat, whatever that looks like. And we were able to convert a space that was a library into this wellness and inclusion center. Kadagi is an Inupiat word for a traditional gathering place where people can learn skills for survival. And so, you know, I'll just say like a lot of this has been very employee-led at Red Dog. I'll show some pictures. So a lot of programming has really come from employees. The name came from employees. The logo that you just saw came from a local artist. And we've been able to bring elders in to kind of welcome people to the site, or to the new space, or the renewed space, I should say. And that's what it looks like on the inside, which I just always approve. I'm like, my feet are in that picture. I'm kicking back on a beanbag chair, and I think it's just like a good opportunity to do something different at site. And yeah, they've, like I say, there's been a lot of employee-led initiatives, crafting There's now Alcoholics Anonymous sessions and Al-Anon sessions. Those came from employees. There's workshops and on things like parenting and balancing like family life and coming to site, like all these things that are just hard. But one of the main things that I think that is powerful about the site is, or about the space, is really the vision behind it around like, one of our HR leaders said, like, we just want people to come and ask hard questions and get answers. And so that's really what it's about, is like being able to talk about hard stuff in a place that's supported, and nobody's going to jump down your throat because you said something. It's just like, let's foster understanding here, is the whole idea. So with that, I'll maybe just pause on this. I think we've spoken to a lot of these lessons learned. But yeah, welcome your questions. I don't see any yet, but we're very keen to hear them.
Thank you so much, Tori and Maria. That was an amazing presentation. I see one question here that I'd like to ask. What has been one of the most noticeable changes that you've noticed since this journey has begun?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I was gonna waiting for you. Yeah. Well, I think we're still like Tori said, we still need to find ways to measure, and we're still hoping for some change. But I think one thing that I have at least identified here, it is a better understanding, like I said, and I think the standards training, policy, and everything that I told you has helped in that. About what is and what is not, right? In terms of a respectful workplace, because what might be respectful to one employee might be very different to another. So I think we have been able to improve understanding, and now I would say the challenge is more of having like the difficult conversations, how to approach it when I encounter them, or if I'm a team leader, maybe I am able to manage it in my team when there's like conflict or something like that. So I think that's the challenge we have now, but I think we have improved of what is and what is not. Yeah. I don't know, Tori, if you agree or do you have anything else to share?
Yeah, I love that. To like bridge off the answer, I think one of the most noticeable things I've seen lately is we have a lot of supervisors saying, I need help. And I think that's so powerful and so courageous and not easy. And they have said, like, I need language to talk about this. Like after the crew talk, my crew says all these things. How do I manage that conversation? How do I help them understand? And so I think that appetite for that support is like one of the most noticeable changes that I've been seeing lately, and something I'm really proud of. Like, it's not easy to put your hand up and ask for help.
That's great to hear. It's really nice to see the way the industry is shifting, right? Another question that's come up here is, how do you make the cultural shift to ensure the behaviors of the workforce align with the spirit of the policy?
This is a great question. It's definitely not just one thing. I think okay, I have an answer, but I think it's really like consistency at all the levels, I think, is a big piece of it. Like, I think sometimes, in not to get like philosophical about change management, but I think in like sometimes in change culture work, you kind of have like a layer of people who are really bought in, and then you have people who are like, they'll attend the meeting, but they aren't bought in fully. And so I think that a big part of it is like speaking up when that's happening, talking about those dynamics, talking about what the resistance is, and seeking to understand it. It's not to say you're wrong, we're right, this is the way forward. It's more to say like, hey, I noticed that like you practice this behavior, and let me say it's hard to get down to the behavioral level on things like this, but I think like really talking about what are the behaviors that help us move forward in a respectful workplace, and those that don't. And then I think, obviously, I'm like, maybe it's not obvious, but I'm a huge nerd around like measurement. So I'm like, yeah, we also need a whole lot of ways to measure the change. And it's also on the slide, like keeping the conversation going, like measuring the change, working with lots of different people to understand like what are the changes that we've seen and what are we still waiting on. So yeah, Maria Paz, what do you think?
I was just thinking that I completely agree with you. And what I think what we're trying to develop more here at Tech in the practice and maybe some programs is recognition. So I think there's also an opportunity of working around recognition when you see employees showing respect for workplace or speaking up, as Tori said. So I think that's also a good strategy for change. Mm.
Amazing. Thank you. I know you touched on this a little bit, but we do have another question of, I think this will be our last one. What are your key performance indicators and how do you measure those?
I totally was going to bring in a slide on this. I'm wondering if it's in this deck. Hold on, I'm going to check. Yeah. Okay, great. I just unhid it for myself. Okay. So yeah, this is like a quick snapshot, but I'll highlight some things around this, around respectful workplace specifically, because there's a lot in here. So some sample KPIs, on the kind of like outputs, like what are we monitoring? What's happening around respectful workplaces? Some of the things that Maria Paz showed around like the number of participants, the number of sessions, that sort of thing, activities, the number of like facilities that we've changed to improve inclusion, like the number of risks that we've managed, et cetera. But then really what we're not, these are all very important things. And we really want to be measuring like outcomes and impact. So for us, that looks like assessing like reports of respectful workplace misconduct. And like Maria Paz said, it's not about reducing them. There's an aspect of reducing them, yes, but also it's a good leading indicator if people are reporting. That's really important. Things like our inclusion and diversity index, our pupils' sentiment around like, can we speak up here? That's really important. And then over time, we're also looking at things like reducing our human rights risks. And then these broader things like employee engagement measures, our like turnover that we look disaggregated across different aspects of identity. So that's, a very high level overview. Anything to add, Maria?
Yeah, I think just to complement, because as you said, I think just a sample or a snapshot and very related to not only respectful workplace, also to equity, diversity, and inclusion, but we do also have other KPIs like representation, like what's the participation of women, indigenous communities, people with disabilities, and also we do a cross analysis in the anonymous surveys around these groups to understand also the experience of them. But yeah, just to say that we have a lot more, but here is like a snapshot of what it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of this great conversation. It's been really awesome to hear from you. I think we can switch to our last poll now, if we're all cool with that. So the last poll is, what is your key takeaway from today? So feel free to put your answers in there.
I don't see the poll yet. Is it just me or
I
the
do see
screen?
it. I see the
Okay.
screen. Yeah, I
Okay.
can tell you
Just
it's
me.
like empathetic change works. We have a lot to learn, constant learning, engagement, let employees drive, momentum, iteration. Really great word for this. Keep an open mind, adaptability, openness. Yeah. Finding new ways for these challenges. Moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Okay, and Kirit threw in a quick question in there. If any of our members are interested in adopting the tech model for EDI, can we connect them with our members? Would that be okay with you, Tori and Maria Paz?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, of course.
Amazing. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for the incredible discussion. This has been a really insightful and valuable webinar today. Thank you to Newmont and Teck for sponsoring this webinar, Newmont for sponsoring the series, and Teck for sponsoring this webinar. Within a week, everyone will receive the recording of today's webinar as well as a short survey. So please let us know what you think. And coming up, we have AME Roundup 2025, which is taking place on January 20th to 23rd. Our registration will be opening October 2nd, so save the date and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a safe day every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a safe
you.
day. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.